Well, that's it, Justin. I have to give up being a Christian because Bill Maher weighed in on the issue, and he told me how dumb it is to be a Christian, and I just completely changed my mind. I'm an atheist now, apparently. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Pastor Josh Barnes, and no, I'm not giving up being a Christian. I'm just laughing at what we're about to watch is Bill Maher and Mike Tyson, who are the experts in theology, are going to tell us where Christianity came from, that it came from all of the Mediterranean myths of the time, that they just sort of conglomerated into this one man Jesus myth. And that's the clip we're going to respond to today. This is the show, by the way, where we're unashamed to look at political, social, cultural, and theological issues from a biblical worldview. We do that because Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. That's the proof that you need. Now, we get comments all the time because they're like, well, okay, but prove that Jesus rose from the dead. I can't do that at every episode. I can't walk through the evidence for the resurrection of the dead in every episode, all right? So we have episodes out there. If you comment, I'm just going to link to that episode, all right? Because that is important, because if Jesus did rise from the dead, then what he said about the Bible being true is really important. And he said that the Bible is true. So that way, if Jesus did rise from the dead, then everything that he said is important, and the Bible is therefore true, and we can't be right about issues if we disagree with the Bible. That's going to be kind of a little bit of the subject today. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Are the stories about Jesus made up myths that just came from previous stories that were already in existence, or is the story of Jesus actually true? Justin, what are your initial thoughts before we jump in? I know you saw it just before we started.
Yeah, I think Bill Maher is way more popular and way more smug than he deserves to be.
Sure.
Here's the thing. You hear me complain all the time about pop atheism. We're about to get some pop atheism. Pop atheism is not good. It's not compelling. It's not intellectual. It's not particularly well thought out, but it is popular. It's by the way, the scholarship is not good of pop atheism. They see someone make a claim and then just run with it. They don't check sources. They don't fact check. They don't do any sort of due diligence, because you wouldn't claim half of the crap that comes out of their mouths, even about what ingredients are in their food. You wouldn't believe them if you actually check sources on what these people believe. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, some of what he's going to say here, it just sounds like the crazy uncle who just sort of comes up with stuff.
Put it this way. He's just taking advantage of the fact that most people aren't going to do the research to say, oh, look, he's just completely bat bleep crazy. He's just wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, he's betting on the fact that most people have no idea how to fact check the claims he's making, which once you do, you know they're absurd.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Well, and at least Mike Tyson in this clip is, you'll see, is admitting that he doesn't know. But Bill Maher seems to think he knows everything. And I think he genuinely does think that, but he's wrong. Okay, let's start the clip, and we'll pause it when we need to pause it.
Believe in Jesus? You believe him far from
Well, I definitely don't believe in Jesus.
Okay, that's cool. Why not?
Because, I mean, it's obviously an ancient myth, and
I love when people just throw obviously in. It's obviously an ancient myth, like obviously, because I don't believe it. That's why it's obvious. Let's see what evidence he gives.
Even the Jesus story, his biography, is completely unoriginal. All the gods that came before him had like the same birthday.
Okay. All right. We've done this before. We actually went through Christmas, the false lies about the myth of Christmas. Here's the thing. In the Jesus story, there's no mention of his birthday. Okay, the Gospels never mention his birthday. Nothing in the Bible mentions his birthday. His biggest is number one leading piece of evidence that Jesus is made up and that the Bible just made up a myth about Jesus is that his birthday is the same as other gods, which it's actually not. But that birthday isn't in the Bible. Like, it's not. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and not only that, not to mention the fact that he's going to go on about what I believe is Saturnalia is what he's going to be talking about, which doesn't come till 300s. The debate in the early church is to the birth date of Jesus, because there was 2 birth dates debated. One is December 25th, one is January 6th. Which God was born on that day. But yeah, so there's plenty of evidence that the historical account of Jesus' birth puts us right around that time, depending on the date. But there's the notion that Christians looked at the pagan world and said, these people who are crucifying us, these people who are attacking us, these people who all of our documents say we're to lovingly try to reach out to them, but we must remain pure in our doctrine, and that we have a conviction of the truth, and the eyewitnesses were willing to die for their faith because of the conviction of the truth of their message, all of that. And you have to say, except for they just said, steal all the pagan stuff. It's absurd. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous in this claim that they just said, pagan god has a December 25th birthday. Really, which one? Which pagan god, Bill Maher? Which pagan god has a December 25th birthday? And please show me the documents that you're referring to, because I've heard Horus and I've heard Dionysus and I've heard all of them. There's no documentation for that at all. You're just running on claims if you want to say that Jesus being December 25th is based off other gods being December 25th. Which ones? Show your evidence. You can't.
There's really no evidence. There's a lot of claims that a lot of different gods had a birthday on December 25th, but there is no source evidence for any of those claims. But even beyond that, the idea that the Jesus story is made up because of his birthday is nonsense, because the Jesus story, as Bill Maher puts it, is in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't mention his birthday. Now, as you said, Justin, yes, it is true that the Christians shortly after, in the next couple hundred years after the death of Christ, did debate when his birthday was, because they wanted to celebrate it. That's not important for whether or not Jesus was true and the story about him, the gospel and the Bible is actually true.
And Josh, let's be clear about this. And this is for, again, people who actually want to do any sort of historical study. What are the early debates in the Christian church? Is it, hey, should we adopt this pagan teaching because it's going to draw in a lot more pagans? Or was it, do you baptize forwards or backwards? And do you baptize once or 3 times? I don't know exactly how we're supposed to do this thing. Those are the debates they had in the early church. If you want to run with this idea that Christianity and the developments after the New Testament, because what we're talking about now would be a development after the New Testament. The Bible, like you said, doesn't give us a date. But if we're going to say that in the early church, Christians said, hey, let's get the pagan stuff and just shove that into our beliefs, you would think we would see, I don't know, 1 shred of evidence. There's none. There's no early documents where Christians are saying this. The only thing you have are Gnostics trying to adopt Christianity. Because what you see in all sorts of religions is they start adopting Christianity and putting it into their religion, not the other way around. So anyway, it's just obnoxious. And by the way, every claim he's about to make, he's going to go through a lot of stuff on this whole Jesus is just a bunch of other pagan stuff thrown into a melting pot. Go watch Dr. James White debate Dan Barker. All of those claims are made in the debate, and he makes them look as silly as they are. Yeah. Dr. White exposes them very handily because this is just a bunch of ahistoric nonsense they're spouting. But that's Bill Maher.
Yeah. Yep. Pop atheism just fails on every level of scholarship. And it's interesting that Bill Maher in a moment is actually going to refer to scholarship and then not actually mention any scholars.
Exactly.
We'll see this in just a second. We're already running late. This might be a 2-parter, Justin. I don't know. Let's see how it goes.
Same story, though.
The same story. The same, yes, disciples, like 12 people. Many of them were crucified.
Yeah, there is claims that other gods had 12 disciples. Just do you remember which one? Which?
Off the top of my head, I want to say Horus. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think they say Horus
because people will claim it about anybody. But there are claims. There's one god that had, I think, 3 close companions, and that's the closest analogy we can find. But no, none of them had 12 disciples.
Yeah, and Horus wasn't. I think it was 4 disciples. Horus was.
It might have been 4.
When all these claims, I've heard all these claims before. When you actually look for source material, I mean, you can even look it up on Wikipedia. I mean, that's how obvious it is. And even on Wikipedia, they have the correct information. Like no, that's not the case. That's like complete nonsense.
Mithra.
That's right. Yeah.
Mithra was supposedly born of a virgin, born on December 25th, 12 disciples, performed miracles, dead for 3 days, worshipped on Sunday. All of that is Mithra stuff.
But all of it is not true. It's like actually not true. And the cult of Mithra, I think, wasn't actually, though Mithra was a god that was like around back in Babylon, the cult of Mithra, I believe, came about later after Christianity.
2nd century. Yeah,
so that was century. So those beliefs about Mithra, even if they were in existence, which there's no evidence for, wouldn't have actually existed until after Christianity.
By the way, Horus also. I'm just because I've dealt with these before. Horus also, what people claim, had 12 disciples. Some sources say 3, some say 4. He also had 16 blacksmiths. So
he had 16 blacksmiths and he had 3 or 4 disciples, not 12. But that's Jesus right there. Like, see, there's a direct parallel because he had blacksmiths.
It's just the same thing, right? It's the exact same thing. I mean, hey, he had 4 close friends and 16 blacksmiths. You take 4 from 16, 12. Boom.
There you go.
Jesus is just a made-up story.
There you go.
I could do pop atheism. Come on. In fact, that's a better argument than he's making.
Never mind that the significance of 12 actually started in the Old Testament with the Jews, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
The same Jesus.
Yeah, they took the stories that were going around the Mediterranean at the time, and they grafted it onto the life of Jesus.
Now, that's a complete assumption based on 0 evidence. And again, as we said, these are not the stories that were going around the Mediterranean at the time. But even if they were, you'd have to make a big jump to say, oh, they just heard all these stories and they just said, oh, let's try to make Judaism like all these other stories, and let's die for it. Even if they try to kill us, we're going to stick to this story, and we're going to go to our graves professing this false story and lose everything of value in this life for this false story. That makes no sense, Bill. 0 sense. None.
Yeah, and again, where is the documentation from the opponents of Christianity giving us any evidence that the 12 disciples weren't real, if that's the claim, or that that all these historical claims about Jesus that you claim are analogous to other gods, even though they're not? Where is the counter documentation that demonstrates it's not true? You have Romans that tried to write things smearing the Christians, but you know what they don't say? The 12 disciples are made up, or anything like that. You have only corroborating evidence in the 1st century. That's it. That's all you have is evidence that corroborates the reports in the New Testament. And even into the 2nd century, you see writings, guys like Papias and others, that corroborate the 12 disciples. And the basic facts that he wants to say are made up from other gods. You have no evidence, Mr. I'm an evidentially based atheist. No, you're not.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really extremely good point. Like, he wants to appear as if he's more intelligent. He's done more research. He understands this more, but he obviously hasn't read for scholarship any of the other documents around Christianity in the 1st and 2nd centuries. Like, we have documents from like Ignatius, we have documents from people who are arguing against Christianity, people who are arguing for Christianity, all within 100 years of Jesus dying. And we actually have these, and nobody who hates Christianity is arguing, oh, that the apostles weren't real, because the people at the time knew, of course, that they were real. Like, this was not something made up. This was something that was challenged as soon as it came out. And if people couldn't produce the actual apostles, then it would be clear that they weren't real, that it was a made up story. This is just bad, just really bad.
I mean, the reason why his birthday is December 25th is because that was
the shortest day of the year. You were telling me something.
Yes, right. because that was the day that the sun started to, when days started to get longer again, so that the people in the pagan times celebrated that day because it meant that we're going to live again because the days kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter in the winter.
And why?
So this is Natalis Sol Invictus, I think, the celebration of Sol Invictus, which is the
Oh, you're right. Sol Invictus, not
birth of the unconquerable sun. Do you have any notes on that one? I don't remember off the top of my head when we talked about this.
Its first reference is in a 4th century document. Christianity, to be generous, Christianity had already claimed December 25th by the 250s. You could probably push that a lot earlier, but I'm being generous here. And the first mention we have of Sol Invictus is in the 4th century. But it actually was December 25th. So that actually was the date, unlike most things people claim.
That's
but
the only
of
all.
We want to say which predates which.
That's right. Yeah, of all the mythical things that people claim were on the 25th, they actually all weren't. The only thing that actually was Sol Invictus, and the earliest documentation of it that we have is the same time as the earliest documentation we have of Christians which all of it's about 300 years. You said this is the 4th century, about 300 years after Christ died and resurrected.
Right.
So, so we don't know which one came first. But the point is, there's zero reason to think that was copied or that disproved the birth of Christ at all.
Jesus is so embedded in our brain.
We're going to die. The days are going to get shorter until there's nothing.
This is what I want to know. Why is Jesus so embedded in so many people's brain? Even people that are Buddhists and all that.
Well, I'll tell you. There's some very interesting.
It's actually a fairly good point, by the way.
Yeah, why is Jesus? Yeah, why is this?
When he just said, "Why is Jesus so embedded in everyone's brain?" Because what you'll notice is that Christianity actually didn't import stuff from other religions, but Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, all of them have to find a way to work Jesus into the religion. Now, they don't all say he's the Son of God, God in human flesh, but they'll have him as a rabbi, a prophet, or a great moral teacher. What's the Baha'i? They'll have him as one of the great teachers of spiritual enlightenment and all that sort of stuff. All these other religions had to work Jesus into them, but Christianity didn't work any of the other deities into it. So that ought to give you at least... I'm not saying that's irrefutable proof that Christianity is true. I'm just saying it's noticeable that one of them didn't have to make up stuff from the outside.
It's definitely a good question. And I don't know, I'm just getting the sense that Mike Tyson is actually, because he's actually changed a lot over the last several years. He's become rather conservative, and he may be flirting with the idea of religion and Christianity, and that might be why he's asking Bill Maher these questions. And it seems to me like this is a genuine question that comes from genuine thought process that's been going through Mike's brain. And to Mike, I'd like to say, you're asking the absolute wrong person. Like, this guy knows nothing. He just pretends like he knows what he's talking about, but he has no idea what he's talking about. So I wish Mike would ask that genuinely to someone who's an actual scholar. But here's his answer. There's some great scholarship on why Jesus is embedded in so many different religions.
Scholarship done on this. There were lots of religions at the time. Of course, there are many that preceded Christianity. The reason why that one caught on is because they grafted these familiar elements onto it, like his birthday and stuff like that, and he's coming back to life. That was an old story. But part of it that was revolutionary was his message.
Coming back hang on. I didn't catch that the first time. Coming back to life.
That was an old story.
I'm glad that he doesn't word it quite the same way, because he wants to go with the same things other people say, but like coming back to life. Yeah, you have some coming back to life stories, like a person being ripped apart and then sewn back together, and actually, but then again, you have that corpse is then mated with, and then the kid is born. It's not really all that analogous to Jesus. You do have some weird stories.
That was Horus, right?
But nothing at all. Yeah, I think Horus was supposedly born of a virgin, but it actually is that the father, I forget, it was ripped apart and then sewn back together and then mated with, and then he's born. So, but yeah, yeah, yes, okay, sorry. It's Isis reanimated Osiris's corpse. So you do
Osiris.
have some
Okay.
people coming back to life. Yeah. So Isis reanimates Osiris, mates with him, and Horus is born, which people say that's a virgin birth. I'm not sure how that works, but okay. But yeah, so you do have a couple come back to life things, but they're never grounded in the real physical world. They're always like in the underworld or in the this, that, or the other realm. It's never like earthly, actual historical narrative. And there are always these weird things like someone sewing a person back together who got ripped apart and then using magic to reanimate them. It's not historical claims like Christianity has. So they're not anywhere close unless you want to say something so vague as there is a God in this religion and there's a God in that religion, therefore they stole from each other.
They stole from each
Okay,
other.
well, that's
And he
basically the
almost
kind
says
of
that
claim
actually. He
he's
says,
making.
well, there were other religions before Christianity, which means Christianity isn't true, right? Because
Which means all of them are
it wasn't
wrong.
the first religion. Oh man. Yeah. So anyway,
By the way, I just want for those atheists who right now are just like banging on their keyboard, who is giving you references? Who is actually saying what he's referring to? Who's giving you his references and then showing you why they're wrong? Who's showing their work?
yeah,
He's
we're
not.
we're doing his work and ours. We're doing double work, which is why this probably will turn into a two-part episode. For those of you watching on FISM TV or on Red American Media, on YouTube though, we'll just carry it right over because we could do that on YouTube. All right, let's play a little bit more of this.
When it really gets good for you is in the afterlife.
So he's saying it's the message of Christianity. It's this message that when it really gets good for you is in the afterlife, and live for the afterlife, not for this life, because their lives were so miserable. I don't know, like a lot of the followers of Christianity gave up a really good life to be Christians, right? They weren't miserable. They weren't slaves. Paul was wealthy, he was powerful, he was a Pharisee, he was an important guy, and he gave it all up because he said, "I saw Jesus alive," which is, by the way, is really, really difficult evidence for atheists to overcome. Why would somebody lie and give up everything and die for a lie that they know is a lie, right? So a lot of people in Christianity were very wealthy people who didn't have, they were just poor, like Lydia, who is in I want to say Thessalonica. I want to say Lydia was in Thessalonica. Maybe not, but wherever Lydia was, or no, she was in Philippi. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was in Philippi. Anyway, so here's Lydia in Philippi. She was a businesswoman. She was rather wealthy, and she becomes a Christian. Oh, because this message of the afterlife. No, because their life was so miserable. No, it's because this is true. They were convinced of the truth of this thing. It wasn't because they didn't have another religion that would promise them good things in the afterlife. Pretty much every religion promises righteous people good things in the afterlife. This is pretty much the baseline of most religions. That's not something new that Christianity invented.
Yeah. I'll leave that there.
Leave it. All right.
Now, we're talking about a Roman Empire that was at least half slaves. You know,
It's not
I mean,
more.
people think slavery was an American invention. It was not.
No.
Everybody in the Bible had them. The word slave comes from Slav, and there's nobody whiter in the world than Slavs.
Not sure what all this has to do with anything. I guess he's saying that everybody was miserable, and so the idea of Christianity spread very rapidly among slaves. Well, there were a lot of slaves who got saved, but there were also a
Well,
lot of masters who got saved, people who owned slaves.
what he might be doing is making a fairly it's a talking point mostly on the right that the whole slavery reparations thing. Well, hang on, we're not the first culture that had slavery, and we certainly weren't even the last. But all throughout human history, there was slavery. Now, what he's not going to do is let you know that there were different kinds of slavery, and not everything called slavery is what we would consider slavery today, and not everything that isn't called slavery means that it wasn't basically slavery. So there's not a lot of nuance there, but what he's making is a point that's true, that if you want to crucify America for slavery, you have to do that for every single other culture everywhere. So it's not a uniquely white sin, even though that's what a lot of liberals want to make it out to be. This is like the one good point he makes, but it has nothing to do with the Bible or religion or Christianity.
Yeah, and I think we need to underscore, though, like you said, slavery is a very complex subject in ancient times, because there were some slaves that were slaves because their country was conquered, and it was sort of like, instead of killing you, I'll make you a slave. There were some slaves that were slaves because they owed a debt and couldn't pay it, so they offered themselves as slaves instead to pay off the debt. It was basically an employment. There were other slaves that were there was, I don't know if it was racial slavery, but it was more like my country is better than your country type of a thing. National slavery. My country conquers your country, that kind of a thing. So there were different kinds of slaves. So when you say 50% of the empire was slaves, it gives this connotation that's a little different than reality, because we think they're just all stolen from their homelands and sold as slaves. That's not exactly the case.
Well, and you do also have a difference when we talk about slavery, even in the Bible. You have a difference between Roman slavery and Israel slavery, because those are two different things. I'm teaching through the Old Testament law, a lot of portions of the Old Testament law, and slavery is one of the things that I have dealt with quite thoroughly. So when we get to his claims about the Bible and slavery, don't worry, we're gonna handle that one, because he woefully misrepresents it. But when it comes to Roman slavery, it certainly wasn't the exact same kind of slavery we think of all the time. It was closer to it than what like Old Testament slavery was. But you're right, slavery had a lot of different reasons for it. Chattel slavery, where you like steal somebody and force them to be your slave, it's basically kidnapping and imprisonment. That's not something that you're going to see the Bible condone, but we'll get to that in a minute. When, depending on if you're watching live on one or if you're on YouTube, you might have to stay tuned for tomorrow to get into that one.
That's right. YouTube. So YouTube, just to understand how our show goes out to K-Star Conservative Radio, to WS. FISM, to Right America Media, and on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're actually watching it late. It's not when it airs originally, but you get to see the whole thing together if it's a two-parter. So you're gonna carry right over. If you're watching on FISM TV, you guys get to see this first. You're the first ones to see it, but the second half is going to come tomorrow. So hang in there for us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. And everyone else, we're just going to carry right over. But FISM, thanks for joining us here on Point of View, and we'll see you next time. All right. If you're just joining us from FISM TV, everyone else just sort of carried over from last time. But this is a two-parter. We are talking about the nonsense really spewed by Bill Maher as he was interviewed, I guess, by Mike Tyson, two deep theologians who really have some scholarly work. And Bill Maher is explaining to Mike Tyson why it's just so stupid to be a Christian. And of course, he doesn't believe in the reality of Jesus or anything like that. And Bill Maher, of the two of them, is the one who said he has read the Bible. Mike Tyson has not. We're going to get into that in a little bit here. But so far, Bill Maher has basically said, oh, yeah, this whole Jesus thing is obviously a myth because, all the things about him having 12 apostles and his birthday being on the 25th, those were all religions that were already in existence. And, this is just, they just took the religions from the area around and sort of pasted it onto Jesus and this myth of Jesus. And Mike Tyson asked the question, well, then why is it that Jesus is like ingrained in everyone's mind and in other religions? And Bill Maher is giving the answer that, it's because of the message, this idea that there's more to life after life. What we're living for is the afterlife, because there were so many slaves and everyone was so miserable during the Roman Empire that everyone was liked this idea of an afterlife thing. The Roman Empire had actually brought Pax Romana, Roman peace. It was was actually a rather prosperous time in the world during this time. I'm not sure that this is an accurate statement, but I wanted to kind of address what Bill says here, because he's kind of skipping the idea. He doesn't come out and say it, but he seems to say that the whole idea of Jesus ever existing is a myth. Like Jesus himself, not just the stories about him, but Jesus himself is a myth, which of course is just completely false by every scholar. I mean, you have a vast consensus of all scholars who have studied this time, all agree that Jesus lived. We have so much documentation, so many writings about him, even from people who were not believers in him, that know that Jesus really existed. He really had a ministry. He really did go around doing good things. Josephus and other historians of the time, they wrote about Jesus was a real person who really lived and really died at the hands of the Romans. This is just uncontested in scholarship. And here's Bill Maher, who thinks that he's got the backing of interesting scholarship that's been done on this. But scholarship had 100% agrees that, or not 100, probably like 99 and some percent, agrees that Jesus was a real, actual person who really lived.
So here's where I think I have a different read on the situation, because if I remember correctly, what he said is that they grafted stories onto his life. So I don't think, and if he's so bold as to say if he's in the Jesus mythicist movement is what it's called, if he's in that movement, he's worse than I thought. But I have a different read. I'm giving him the grace of thinking that he does think Jesus was a real person, just with a lot of fables around, a lot of legends about what he actually did. But if you're right, then yeah, I think we're all getting over the experts are the unquestionable voice on an issue, because experts need to be proven just like anything else. But you're right, the scholarship doesn't agree with you if you think that Jesus wasn't real. Now, it gets a little foggier when you go out from there, but he was real.
Yeah.
And that's a baseline that you don't need to be a Christian to believe Jesus was real.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's which kind of means that if there is a real story, then this idea of 12 apostles and everything else would be something that would be hard to tell to people who were there and saw it. Say, oh, he had 12 apostles. No, he didn't. Like, right. So it'd be hard to spread that story to people who were there and lived through it. And since it was written by people who were there and spread by people who were there to people who were around during the time, it'd be very hard to spread that story of false stories.
And on the 12 disciple thing, again, just one more quick thing. We already know that they were accusing the disciples of stealing Jesus' body. So how are there no disciples? How is the disciples thing made up if they were accused of stealing Jesus' body? I believe it's Matthew who gives an apologetic who says that the guards were given a lot of money to say the disciples stole his body. Now, you don't have to believe Matthew to go, well, at least there's evidence that the argument was being used against the Christianity movement that the disciples stole the body, which means one way or the other, the body wasn't there and there were disciples. Those are two things that are unquestionable facts of history if you just use deductive reasoning. So Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, no, and we've talked about this before. There is so much evidence for the resurrection, but even before that, the reality of Christ and his ministry has even more evidence. It's just undeniable, really. All right,
we'd be here forever if we got into all of that.
Yeah. Let's let him continue. I rewound it just a little bit so we can see the lead up to what he's about to say here.
An American invention? It was not.
No.
Everybody in the Bible had them. The word slave comes from
here.
Slav, and there's nobody whiter in the world than Slavs. Slavery has been around since the beginning of time, and mostly it wasn't even a racial thing, simply because people weren't living in an area where there were people of other races. It's just human nature, brutal human nature, to make other people your slave if you possibly can. Now, we have come a long way since that time, but in the Bible, nobody even thought to condemn it. There's lots of rules about slavery in the Bible. None of them are, don't do it.
All right, Justin. I know the Bible says very clearly, Paul writes to slaves and says, hey, if you can obtain your freedom, do it. And if not, live for Christ in whatever situation you're in. He definitely encourages slaves to seek freedom. Is it true that the Bible never says that slavery is wrong?
Well, this is where you have to go back to what I said at the end of our last episode. If you're not
Watching it in two parts.
Right. If you're watching in two parts here, because slavery does not mean the same thing, Old Testament and New Testament. Yes, there's slavery in the Old Testament, and yes, that's in God's law, and yes, hint, hint, it was good. We'll get there. But I will go out there on a limb and say it was good. But what you do have is the biblical. Here's okay. The Bible does not say that if you steal a man, it's a sin. It actually says you get the death penalty, because that's in the law that gives us laws regulating slavery. It says, he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. In other words, if you kidnap somebody, if you kidnap them and have them as your slave, or if you kidnap them and sell them, or if you bought a kidnapped person, you get the death penalty.
There we go. Right there, all slavery in the United States is now condemned by the Bible.
Bingo. All slavery in the United States is condemned. All slavery that Bill Maher is referencing, forcing someone to be your slave, outside of a war scenario, which that's a different situation. We might get into that in a minute. But if we're talking about the slavery that God put in his law that was good and just, that was a slavery that, yes, has the word slavery, but was not about kidnapping and subjugating people. The slavery in the Old Testament, slaves were protected with equal rights as humans. He's going to make a dumb claim that's just not true in a minute about that. But no, if you killed a slave, you got the death penalty. If you beat your slave and you did permanent damage, they went free. You just lost the cost that you paid for that slave. If you beat them and they die of the wounds that you beat them, you are given the death penalty. That there's equal protection for slaves all throughout, and in fact even more protection when it comes to things like oxes, because there's also a financial investment. So there's tons of stuff when it comes to slaves, protections for them. But it was the primary idea of slavery in the Old Testament was a social safety net. If you don't have slavery in the Old Testament, you have a lot more dead people, because if your crop fails and you're poor, you are screwed. Instead of dying because your crops didn't produce enough food for you to get through the year, you could go to a neighbor who's more fortunate than you and say, hey, I'll make a contract with you. Myself or one of my household, we're going to work with you for X amount of years, and you will provide for us so we don't die, and we will work for you. That was slavery. That is very different from what Bill Maher is going to portray it as. There was also situations where if you...
Basically what we're talking about is a lot of the slavery in the Old Testament was essentially similar to employment today. You know, I don't have a means to make my own money or to be my own boss, so I'm going to go to someone else and say, if you'll provide for me and give me money, I will work for you. Only the rules are different.
Yes. Now, there were other situations, like, for example, the justice system of the Old Testament being so much better than ours. You didn't become a slave of the government if you committed a crime. So if you, for example, stole from your neighbor, you had to repay it double. And certain circumstances with animals, there's other rules, but we're not going to get into the nuance there. But if you couldn't pay it back, you would be sold as a slave, and that money given to pay for the debt that you owe because you stole from them. But there were certain circumstances like that, debt, poverty, but it was all a way. The primary mode of it, I guess, was a safety net for the poor. And this man is going to say, well, no, they should have died, basically. Because if you want to go after Old Testament slavery, you're going after the protection God gave for the poor. He gave a lot of other protections for the poor as well, but this was a way to keep them alive.
So if I can recap, and I know you have a few other points to make, but if I can recap, so far, what you've laid out is actually really good. I love how you've pieced this all together, because mine would have kind of been scatterbrained. So let's recap what we've talked about so far. So far, in the Old Testament, what we're talking about here is actually common sense good stuff like, hey, if you're broke, you can work for someone else and sign a contract to be their servant in order to keep yourself alive. If you steal instead of going to prison, you're going to become a servant. You're going to work off the debt, basically. Or if you get into debt, which is and can't pay it back, which is basically theft, then now you're going to become a servant until you've paid that off. So this is actually common sense, reasonable stuff that was really well thought through. But the idea of stealing a person and selling them as a slave is actually said to be completely wrong and wicked. Mm-hmm. But in the New Testament we have, the Roman Empire is in control, not the Jewish following the law of God thing. And the Roman Empire, of course, did have a lot of slaves from conquering other nations, slaves from this, slaves from that. And those slaves, Paul says, listen, if you're a slave, if you're a master, you better treat your servants well. If you're a slave, seek for your freedom, but serve your master well for the sake of reaching them with the gospel. So there's no, this is wonderful that you're a slave. It's seek freedom, but while you don't have it, live for God where you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's incomprehensible to some people nowadays, but your freedom from oppressive circumstances is actually not the number one goal of the Christian life. It's actually the gospel and pleasing God. So there is seek your freedom, but if God has called you to be a slave, he's put you in a situation where there are people who have done this injustice to you, then you do what you can with where God has put you. But that's, again, he's making the equivocation like that slavery and the slavery God put in his good, just law are the same thing, and they're simply not. Yeah. And this again is not to mention a lot of, like, again, I've been teaching through the Old Testament law. There's a lot of great stuff about slavery, about the protections for slaves. And by the way, they were all freed every 7 years. So there's that. And you were given your land back, which is one distinction between a foreign slave versus an Israel slave, because you had land that was important to your family and you were given it back when you were freed and things like that, whereas a foreign slave wouldn't have a land. So there's lots of rules like that. But
you couldn't be a slave for more than 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Put it this way. Slavery was God's demonstration that he cared for the poor and he cared for his people. Slavery was a wonderful gift from God in Israel.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say that.
It's just because we use the word slavery, and that is connected to the stealing of people and the selling of people against their will, rather than the word servanthood, or maybe a more appropriate word for it.
And on the flip side, we have today slavery in America. Absolutely, unquestionably, we have it. We just call it something else. We call it prison.
Yeah.
I do not agree with the justice system we have. If you kill somebody, it is not just that the government then just got a slave. If you steal from somebody, it is not just that the government just got a slave. If you if you break various sundry laws, if you commit fraud and all that sort of stuff, it is not just that the government just got a slave. But that's what it is. They stole you, so to speak, and they are keeping you to do what they want you to do. That's slavery. You are their property. Whether you like it or not, we have slavery, we just don't call it slavery, so you're not outraged about it.
Yeah.
The Old
Seems like God's system and God's law just kind of works better, doesn't it? It's just interesting.
It's better. It's a lot better. Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's let Bill Maher continue, because I know he's got a lot to say.
They never even thought to say that. Like, don't do it. God's perfectly okay with it. His boy Jesus is perfectly okay with it.
Okay, we just said no. That is actually the slavery that he's referring to is condemned, and Jesus confirmed the law. It said all of it is true. So, yeah. So no, this is completely false what he's saying here.
They have rules like, if a man kills your slave, you may kill his slave.
Is that a rule, Justin?
No, chapter and verse, please.
That's just...
Chapter and verse. In fact, no. It's if you kill your slave, you get the death penalty. That's the laws they had. It's if your ox gores a person's slave and you knew that ox was tending to gore, then you got the death penalty because you let your ox gore that man, and the owner of the slave gets the payment for a slave too. There was protection for slaves. You couldn't beat them and do permanent damage. You could discipline them, but you couldn't do any sort of permanent damage to them or they go free. If you killed them, you get the death penalty. They were protected. This man just is making crap up because he knows you are not going to fact check him. He knows you are not going to go to the sources. Give me a chapter and verse on this one, Bill.
Well,
I dare you.
He's talking to Mike Tyson, who admits, I've not read the Bible. So he's talking to people he knows he can get away with this. He knows he can say, oh, in there is this rule that if someone kills your slave, you get to kill their slave. No, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would that be there? No, it's not in there.
This entire thing that he's done from Jesus is taken from false gods and this thing on slavery could all be refuted in this. Sources, please.
What? Yeah. Give us a source for this. And here's the thing. Yeah. If you have the tendency of Bill Maher, you're probably not watching this because you think you're right about everything. But if you really do have this idea that, like, I'm right about everything, you really need to be able to provide sources, because you have this susceptibility. If you're that kind of personality, it's not your fault that you have that kind of personality. All right, you are very susceptible to believing whatever you think is true and then just saying it's true because you think it, right? You, of all people, need to be sure that everything you believe is based on actual facts, right? So go back and find sources, find actual source material and evidence, and provide sources when you're. Bill Maher seems to be claiming his own intelligence as the source for this, which is clearly not as intelligent.
Well, to be fair, what he's doing is he's heard people claim things, and so he's going to claim them too, having not vetted them himself. That is called dishonesty. You're saying things you don't know that are true.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That sounds like a good little. But nobody ever said, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should put that in the 10. Maybe we should put that in the 10 Commandments.
I never read the Bible, so I don't know.
Well, I have.
You didn't dig it, what you was reading?
Well, as a historical document, it's interesting, and it's certainly fundamental to understanding our civilization. So I took it as scholarship when I was in college. But do I believe it? Of course not. It was written by people in the Bronze Age who didn't know what a germ or an atom was.
So it can't be true because it was written by people in the Bronze Age. And these people didn't know what a germ or atom was, so it just cannot be true. Why would we think that anything that people wrote before they knew what a germ or an atom was could possibly be correct? Like, what?
That's the epitome of hubris. That right there. There is nothing that the ancients have to offer us as far as wisdom. Our generation that doesn't know what a freaking woman is, not to mention a germ or an atom, we can't define things they never struggled with. But for some reason, our generation's smarter. Come on.
Yeah.
It is hubris to think that you, and this, by the way, this is a problem, Josh. You know, when you study church history, to think that we're wiser than all the Christians that have come before us, as if we have a better knowledge of To throw everyone under the bus before you as if they were just a bunch of dullards does not make you look good. It betrays a astonishing level of arrogance.
Yeah.
Yes, we have better scientific knowledge. That doesn't mean that we have a better grasp on truth.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. Let's try to fit in what he has left to say before we run out of time again, because we're not doing a third episode here.
It's a bunch of nonsense, and it's wicked. Also, it's full of.
We gotta stop there.
Ethnic cleansing,
slave. We gotta stop there. Okay, all right, Justin. I know you want to make a point. I'm gonna make it first, just to steal it away from you. Bill, how do you know that anything is wicked? Like, what is your standard for wickedness if it's not the Bible and God? Right? You've got to have a standard by which you say something is wicked. If it's just evolution and nature and natural law, you have no standard for wickedness. Why is ethnic cleansing and slavery wicked if we're just evolved apes, right? Is it wicked for apes to kill one another? Is it wicked for a lion to kill a zebra? Is it wicked? I mean, no, it's not. There's no such thing as wicked. Is it wicked for a dog to rape another dog? No, there's nothing wicked about that because they're just animals. Why is anything wicked? You're using the standard of the Bible about wickedness and then trying to say that the Bible is wicked, which is just not true.
Bill Maher grew up in a culture that was shaped by the Bible. He grew up with a worldview that was largely shaped by the Bible, whether he likes it or not. Therefore, when he hears things about loving people, he thinks that's good, which it is. And it's also biblical. If he hears things about murder being bad, he thinks it's bad. And it is, because of the Bible. Because God revealed his perfect standard, and that is the basis for our morality. And though he doesn't admit it's the basis for it, it's the basis of his morality too. If I had to say one thing, Bill, I'm taking my ball back. You need to go find your own. Go get your own standard, and then tell me what is right and wrong in that one. And please make it an objective one, because right now, all you have, if you want to say it's not Bible morality, then what, according to what standard? Why is a bag of fizzing chemicals interacting with another bag of fizzing chemicals? Why is there any moral implication whatsoever? There isn't.
Yeah.
And you know it. Because your worldview is vapid.
Ethnic cleansing. The Bible's full of ethnic cleansing. The only ethnic cleansing that you find in the Bible is when the Jews are told to take the land of Canaan. And this is after hundreds of years of God warning the people in Canaan, saying, you better turn from your wickedness. And he even says, like, the time's not yet. You guys have to wait. You got to go to Egypt and be slaves for hundreds of years because it's not yet time. The iniquity of the Ammonites, he says, is not yet full. It's not bad enough for me to have to take them out yet. So God gives them grace. He gives them grace. He warns them. And then finally, he brings the people of Israel in to, yes, wipe out this wickedness. God has the right to tell people who are wicked, your time's up. I'm not giving you any more time to be wicked. God has that right. So ethnic cleansing.
And well, real quick, and one of the main reasons God states for why he does it is so that they won't adopt their practices. You know what those practices involve? Things like taking your children, putting them on a burning altar and sacrificing them alive. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't think God is off his rocker to say you need to wipe that out. You need to make sure that doesn't become a thing. And by the way, because they actually didn't do it, guess what Israel started doing? The exact same thing. Yeah. Offering sacrifices to Molech. So, yeah, there was a reason for it, and it was good and just. And if you want to say it's not just, what is justice? What is right? What is moral?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my goodness. This has just been one giant knock out of the park. I think he's got just one more thing to say, so let's let him finish.
Again, just the fact that slavery is not condemned. They have a list of 10 things you absolutely should not do, but slavery and rape are not on the list.
Okay, they have a list of 10 things that you absolutely should not do, but slavery and rape are not on the list. Well, rape is certainly... Rape is definitely on the list.
Rape got you the death penalty in the Old Testament law.
Rape, you'd get the death penalty. Slavery, as you said, the stealing of a human being, also got you the death penalty. And rape, by the way, the Bible, one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not commit adultery. The scriptures make it very clear. Jesus affirmed that this is going even beyond just the commission, the technical adultery of somebody who's married. No, this goes beyond that. It really encompasses sexual sin beyond that. Jesus said, if you look at a woman to lust after, you've committed adultery already. You're a sinner. You've broken the 10 commandments. This is much broader than that, according to the scriptures. Bill Maher, if you want to comment about how ridiculous the scriptures are, you really need to study them enough to know what they actually say and respond to the actual claims of actual Christians rather than just dismissing it because you read it one time and obviously didn't read it very well and think that you now can educate the world on how stupid Christianity is. What you've really done is just showed your own ignorance of the subject.
Yeah. This is why I say pop atheism, it's not good. This is, Ironically, when he got off Christianity and talked about other things, he actually got a little bit better. But he
Yeah.
just started making claims that he didn't care to back up, didn't care to give you any references, and he starts just saying the Bible says stuff it doesn't say. This man knows nothing about what he's talking about. And I don't think we have to tell you that that's not the kind of person you should go to for your information.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've touched out on a lot on these two episodes, one long episode. We've talked about the reality of Christ. We've talked about the Old Testament law. We've done a lot in 1 hour's time, and I'm pretty satisfied with this. This was covering a lot of ground, and I think we gave you a lot of good information. But we do have more episodes out there where we've talked about the evidence for the resurrection of Christ. We deal with a lot of these subjects. If you go to the YouTube channel, Point of View, you can do youtube.com/Point of View with JB, Point of View with JB, and you can find right there on the channel. You'll find a playlist responding to skeptics. And we actually responded to Atheists for Liberty. We respond to a lot of these kinds of things. And we're going to do a little bit more of it this week, actually. We'll have a couple more episodes similar to this, where we respond to these kind of arguments against the Bible. Listen, Christianity is true. And if Christianity is true, it matters on every level. It's the worldview by which we look at everything. And so this is important that we prove that it is true. And I think we've done a lot of work towards that. If you're still a skeptic, stick with us. We mean to change your mind. That's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next time on Point of View.